All right, so for the agenda, for those of you who have been here before, you already guys know the drill. We're going to talk about the data set. We're going to look at some of the visuals. We're going to look at some tips and tricks that you might consider whilst building the reports. And of course, we're also going to be talking about the challenge itself. So, how to submit your reports, where to find the reports, how to get the developers their licenses, and things like that. I'm going to very briefly cover those as well. So, just so you kind of are caught up to everything, right? And then at the end, of course, one thing that we always have is a Q&A session. So if you do have any questions throughout the session, it doesn't matter if you do it, whilst I'm talking about something or wait till the very end. Feel free to post your questions in the comments. So ask us anything. I'm going to try to answer every single one of those. If it's something that requires a little bit more time or a little bit more investigation, then we can get back to you later on. But I'll try to cover everything that I can during the session. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to just post them and we're going to go through them afterwards. All right. Yeah, I think already one of my colleagues helped out. So yeah, these sessions are always going to be recorded. So every single one of our sessions is recorded. The recording is going to be sent to you afterwards. So you're going to have ability to also rewatch everything whenever you have more time, or if you just want to go through one or some other or one or the other thing that I covered during the session. So you don't have to do it straight away or write down notes. If you can, if you want to, of course, but there is going to be possibility to rewatch everything as a recording. So that's always available to you. And for those of you who are new here, one thing that I can also recommend you is if you go to resources. Well, first of all, if you go to our website and if you go to resources and webinars, these ones are going to be the upcoming ones, right? Upcoming webinars. So this is the one that's happening right now. And we have a few others coming in. But if you scroll down a bit lower, you can find the webinar recordings. So for every single session that we have had since the beginning of the challenges, if a recording was made, this recording is going to be available in the archive. So if there's any particular challenge that, if you, for example, see one of the top 5 reports and you want to see what we said about it or how some things were achieved, you can look at these recordings, go through them, rewatch them, see if anything kind of pops out, and you can implement it in your reports as well. The reason why this is also going to be, I'd say, rather important in this particular scenario is because there's going to be another feature that I implemented also in one of our visuals, which I covered in the November challenge of Onyx when I was building the sample there. So I explained how to achieve that as well. So the recordings are there. You have the possibility to go through them. So in this one, supply chain data analysis. So recordings are there. You can go through them wherever you want to, and it's an amazing resource that you can utilize. The same way as, don't forget that for the challenges, if you go to the main page, you also have the full archive of all the challenges, all the winning reports, and all the submissions. So for example, if we open up December, we can see that this is the winning report. You can open it up, take a look at how things have been done, and every single report you can also download as a PBIX. So there's an amazing amount of resources that you can just get, basically for free. There's nothing associated with that. And take a look at how things have been done. You can see what our experts have, thought about the reports. What are the main comments and so forth? What are the main improvements? Just to kind of have few ideas on what we are looking for whenever we're going through these reports, right? But the most important thing, whenever you're building a report, from my side at least, is don't try to make the ultimate version of it, right? This is one of the things that I've seen a lot happening very recently, actually, is that people are afraid to kind of submit their okay work, sort of like, right? They feel that it's okay, but of course it could be a lot better. So until I get to that better version, I'm not going to be submitting my report and I'm just going to wait till I get better and better. Don't do that. The main reason why you don't want to do that is because every single time you submit a version of a report, what we do is from our side, we also go through that report. So if it gets verified, if you have done all the prerequisites, so there's Zoom charts visuals included in the report, you have submitted in a timely manner, we also give you personalized feedback. So in that feedback involves, for example, in this, for example, report, the 3 cars that you have at the top, their alignment is off. So those, in some cases, those might be very small things, but they help you to make the report a lot better. In other cases, it helps you to get a different perspective on how we see for example, the same visual that you're looking at. we see it slightly differently, and we can give you some new ideas on how to modify the visual. So don't be afraid to submit your reports, get that feedback, improve the reports, and submit a new version. There's no limitation on how many versions can you submit, at least for our mini challenge, right? So there's no limitation on that. So go ahead whenever you have a version that you feel is okay, submit it, get some initial feedback, and then whilst you still have the time, improve and submit a new version. That's completely fine. So in this case, what we're going to be looking at is going to be some merch sales data. And in this case, that's going to be Lee Chapman. He's a popular influencer, right? For those who have been here before, you know that we have a colleague, Lee Chapman. So kind of close to it. We wanted to boost his profile. So now he's an influencer with over 7 million followers on TikTok. So all good there. But yeah, we're going to look at some merch sales. There's going to be some trends that you can follow there. There's going to be different products that you can investigate and different order statuses that we can go through as well. So once you go into the challenge page, you can download the dataset right here. And once you open up the dataset, as always, there's going to be two things within that zip file. And if I open it up, yep, it's going to be right here. So there's going to be two things, right? You have the cheat sheet and you have the actual data. So what the cheat sheet is basically a PDF file that allows you to look at certain replacement visuals. So for example, any visual that you see right here on the right hand side can also be replaced with one of our visuals. This is just for newer sort of developers to get an idea of what these visuals kind of have as a bundle, right? So what they cover and what I could replicate. So this covers those. So yeah, make use of that as well. As for the data itself, now if we go to Power BI, now let's open up the Power Query. There are two things within the Excel file. You have the data and you have the dictionary. So the dictionary, as always, is there for you to understand what particular columns represent and what is going to be. And sometimes we also cover what data type they are. In this case, we just have a description. So have it with you. The reason why it helps is just so whenever you're building a report, for example, it allows you to better understand what sort of correlation could you look for within different columns, right? So for example, if you look at total sales, that's the total sales made through the purchase. Whereas if we look at sales per unit, that's the sales cost whilst including international shipping charges. So the charges are included in there as well. So there are a few different things that you kind of go through and make sure that you understand what that value represents. As far as the data goes itself, pretty straightforward. We have order ID, we have order dates, product ID. So this is already something you can sort of group by. You have different product categories. And make sure you don't make the same mistake as I did whenever I started to play around with the data. I was just checking the data, right? And what I did is I accidentally filtered out just one product category, pressed OK, forgot that I did that, sent the data to Power BI, and I was trying to build different visuals. I was like, damn, this data set seems kind of boring because we only have one product line. Everything's so similar in the sense, not very interesting. And then I realized that if I go back to Power Query, one of my last steps that I did is filtered rows, which if I remove, gives me a lot more different product categories. And now it becomes a lot more interesting. So just pay attention to all the steps. And then remember that in Power Query, you have all your applied steps right here on the right-hand side. So you're not going to get lost. Every single step is going to be visible right here. What you can see also happening in a lot of reports is that people rename these steps, right? Like for example, we said promoted headers, that's pretty straightforward. But for example, if I, let's say, filter out a particular row, and if it would be intentional, I could leave it as filtered rows and then look at the syntax itself, see what exactly was filtered out. Or I could just rename it and say that, for example, in this particular step, I filtered out clothing rows. Thing. Something like that, right? So make sure you just adjust if it's necessary for them to make full context and you better understand what exactly has been done and what step. So that's just something to take a look at. When you're in Power Query, don't forget to play around with the column quality and profile. So column quality are these three identifiers right here at the top. Column profile is whenever you click on a column, it gives you this sort of view. It shows you the value distribution. It shows you a couple of statistics, right? What's the count of rows? What's the distinct number of rows? What's the min, the max, and so forth, right? So sometimes it's very beneficial because if I go through not the first 1,000 rows, but for example, in this case, the whole data set, I can see that, okay, product category, okay, there's 7.4 almost rows of data. Okay, so there's 3 different main product categories. Okay, so genders, we have 2, buyer's age, we go from 20 basically, or 18 to 35. Okay, we could play around with groups, maybe something like that. Location, you can see how many there are and so forth. So this just allows you to kind of look at the data without really creating the visuals straight away, right? It just allows you to have a better understanding of what's underneath the hood, basically. And this is what I usually do as well. I just go through the Power Query view, I look at the columns and see, okay, how many unique values, international shipping is yes, no. This is something that we covered also in another challenge where if these values make no sense to you or if they seem confusing, let's say, for example, right, this is basically a flag. Does the purchase include international shipping? So it's yes or no, basically, right? You could just completely change this column and say that this is going to be the shipment method. And where it says no means it's going to be domestic. If it's yes, means it's going to be international. So you have the full of a sort of possible way on how you want to tackle this, how you want to look at this. You don't have to use exact same names that you see right here. You can rewrite those columns. You can do anything with the data that allows you to have a better story. You can enhance the data with additional information as well if you want to. What we do is we provide you with the base, right? So everybody has the same starting point. But what you do with the data is completely up to you. If you think that, for example, let's say these product categories, just 3 of them, it's okay, but under clothing, you wanted to have also different products as just different products to kind of play around with. You can create that those additional columns and create those different product types or product, just product names, for example. So you have the full power to do that. There's no restrictions on that. Then we have sales prices, shipping charges, sales per unit, quantity, total sales, ratings, and reviews. So we have something with reviews, which would be ideal if we could do some sentiment analysis, but that's Power BI premium feature. So maybe play around with a workload, but I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of those. But based on a rating, we could at least create some sort of a visual to just play around and see what's the average rating. Does it really differ, for example, for high value products? Is it higher for high value products? Is it higher for low value products? Is there any trend that's dependent on location or in? So there's a lot of things that you can do with this, right? Now, when it comes to the visuals itself, what I've done is I played around with just a few of them. I'm going to apply the changes because I have those filtered rows. There we go. So what I did is I just have a couple of cards. In this case, it's just a singular visual. I'm using the new card visual and just adding multiple rows. But you could do this also with just regular cards. There are multiple ways on how you can do this. The reason why new cards, for example, sometimes can be a little bit more beneficial is because remember you have reference labels for the new cards. For those of you who don't know, I'm not going to create them right now. I'm just going to open up an article just to kind of showcase an image reference. There we go. So for the new cards, you can have additional icons. You can have reference labels. You can showcase increases, decreases, and so forth. So there's a lot more within them. And one thing that I've always told you guys is there's a tremendous amount of videos you can find online, right? Find a content creator who explains it best to your understanding, and just take a couple of take a look at few of those and play around with those. It can add a lot of value to the report that you're building, essentially. But what I did basically is I kept the cards to a minimum. So I'm just looking at total sales, quantity, how many orders I have in total, and what's the average purchase. So those are the 4 KPIs that I'm basically following through. Then I created a timeline visual. So for the timeline visual, I utilized the typical date approach, and I'm seeing everything on a monthly basis. And then on top of it, I created a new series which shows me month over month comparison. So whether I'm doing better or worse in regards to the previous month. So that's one of the things that you can play around with as well. I'm going to recreate all these visuals step by step as well. I'm just quickly going through them. Then one of the things that you can always play around with is going to be the top number of locations based on something, for example, whether it's locations, whether it's product categories. In this case, since we only have 3 product categories, it kind of seemed redundant to create a top 3, so right? Because there's only going to be 3 of them. So locations is something that you can look into if you wanted to a bit more. But the top 10 can also be calculated in different ways. So what I did in this case is I went with the bare minimum approach, where I went into the filters panel. I went into the order location. I applied a filter type, which is called top n. So I'm referencing a number of positions that I want to look into. Then I said it's going to be 10, and it's going to be based on total sales. So if I, for example, say that this is going to be 5 and I hit apply, you can see it only showcases me 5 locations. So based on total sales, it automatically calculates and showcases those results that are necessary. So for example, if I select a different month, this is still going to show me only the top 10. So this is a bare minimum approach, right? Where you physically lock the number of top units that you want to look into. Alternatively, and this is the reason, like I said, why it's beneficial to look at some of the old recordings. Let me see this report. So this was in November of Onyx Challenge. So what I did in this case is I played around with a couple of calculations. And what this allowed me to do is you can see that instead of defining, for example, through the filter panel, a particular number of units that I want to see here, I'm actually using a different approach. So I'm telling that, hey, I don't want you to showcase any SKU, so product numbers, that don't have a rank. And how do you know which ranks are available to you is by this slider right here. And this just allows me to say that, hey, I actually want to look at the top 20 products, for example. So you're giving the power to the user to play around with the top numbers. You could theoretically allow the user to edit the filter panel, right? But it's not super intuitive, I would say, like that. Having these sort of slicers, it fits a lot better into the whole overall design. Because what I do in most of the cases is the filter panel is some place where I add some hidden filters, and then afterwards I just disable the filter panel. It's not necessary for the end user. So all the controls that he needs are going to be on the screen. Whether it's going to be, for example, a pop-up window or something like that, that's a different thing. But it's all going to be available from one screen when no panels are necessary in order to customize it, basically. So top number can also be played around in different variations. Then, of course, the same thing can be also done on a scatter plot, for example. Again, same thing. I could go with a fixed amount of numbers or fixed amount of, for example, locations. So only the top 10 locations. I could have a drill down. So what I did in this case is I'm utilizing our scatter plot visual and I'm showcasing the order locations. And if I drill down into one of those are going to showcase the order ID. So for example, that we can see in the top 10, we actually have one outlier. So Sydney, which has the highest average rating and the highest amount of sales. So if I click on it, that's going to show me the split of all the ratings that I have here. Of course, it's going to be always 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because we don't have 2.5 or something like that, right? But what this allows me to also do is, for example, if I don't have another visual which allows me to play around with the rating, I can use a rectangular selection in a scatter plot and just select everything that had 5-star review, basically. Select everything that had 4 and 5-star review, right? And again, kind of have a more extended version of the same discussion, but just from a different perspective. The one thing though that's happening here, which you want to avoid as much as possible, is this what's happening right here, right? I know in this case it's done on purpose, right? I'm just showcasing different visual options. But what you can see happening is since I had location right here, and I also have location right here, and that's the only bit of information that's being displayed. As soon as I select Sydney in the scatter plot, This is also going to showcase only Sydney. And I think you can agree with me that just one massive bar doesn't look very visually appealing, right? Sure, I could make it smaller, for example, something like this, but still it just seems awkward. So what you try to avoid is having the same dimensions on visuals and having scenarios where the user can accidentally filter out and leave just one of the options. So this is something you try to avoid as much as possible. In the scatter plot, what I also have done is I added X and Y thresholds. The reason for this is because what I basically wanted to do is these thresholds are driven by the average value on X and Y axis, and I wanted it to create those four quadrants. So the reason I wanted to have these, I would call these, sort of the best selling segment. So this is where the highest amount of money is, and those regions have above average rating as well. So the two regions are Sydney and New Jersey. I could try to kind of filter it out this way, but the reason why the scatter plot works so well is because since I have these visual segmentations, I can again use the same rectangular selection to just select whatever I need to. I don't have to use control click or just individual, because I could do this, right? I could hold down control and select this point and then this point and then maybe this point, but you can do this just with a rectangular selection. If in some cases the selection that you're trying to create is a bit more skewed, what you can do is you can use a lasso tool, and the lasso tool allows you to create whatever free-form selection shape you want to, so that everything that was included in the shape is going to be passed out as a filter to the rest of the visuals. So just play around with the visuals. That's the main thing I would definitely recommend. At the first, sure, the visuals that you create may be not very complex, they're very basic. That's fine. But the more you play around with the visuals, the more ideas you're going to get for them. This is the reason why I said take a look at some of the previous top 5 announcements where you can see how people have been utilizing the visuals. Take a look at some of the workshop sessions where we go through the visuals and explain how to achieve certain things. This is why there's a lot of information that you can utilize for this, right? There's also internal resource, not internal sort of resources, but also resources that you can find online. There's things like on the website, you also have report examples, you have the visuals gallery, you have documentation, you also have video tutorials, which takes you to the academy. And academy is, again, a free resource where, let's say, you want to learn about the scatter plot. You open it up, and I just go through the visual and explain the initial setup, what are the main formatting options, how to customize certain things. So make use of all the materials that you have. I fully also understand that if you wanted to do everything, that's just too much time. I get it. You don't have to do everything, but just start step by step, right? Let's say you want to play around with the scatter plot a bit more in this challenge. Well, then focus on the scatter plot. Leave the rest of the visuals to still have the ability to tell a compelling story. Like, for example, in order to create a timeline visual, even without these comparisons month over month, it's super easy, right? Let's for example do it. So I'm going to add a timeline right here. What I'm going to have is the order date in the date hierarchy. I'm going to have also order date as an actual date. And then I'm going to have total sales in series 1. So this is the default setup, right? It went to yearly view. That's because that's the highest level of the hierarchy that it had available. But if I look at it, it's like, it just looks again a bit weird, right? I know that I didn't have a lot of sales in 2023 because we started at the end of 2023, but I would want to have it on a monthly view. So one of the things that you can do is go to the formatting options, initial display unit, switch from top to custom, and then select month. On the initial glance, it kind of seems like nothing changed. Yes, the keyword is initial. So currently it's sitting in the same previous initial state, which was the top level of the hierarchy. Now, in order to reload it, just simply move between the pages. Allow the visual to have a new initial view, basically a fresh start, right? And now you can see everything's on a monthly basis. And what I had else there in that case, I think is I had product category as a legend. by default, it's going to be clustered, but if you go to formatting options and series default, you can say that instead of clustering, you're going to have a stacked visual. So there you go. Sure, like I said, without those top month over month comparisons, you already have another visual that you can utilize in sort of combination with the scatter plot. And the cool thing about this, or the way and how we build our visuals, is we're always utilizing filtering as the main capability. So for example, if I again create the same scatter plot again from scratch, I'm gonna have it right here. And in this case, I'm gonna have rating on x-axis, and I'm gonna have total sales on y-axis. So by default, we're summing these values. So in order to split it down, you need some sort of a category. And what I had there was order location and order ID. So there we go. Now I could just click on one of these and investigate it further, right? Instead of summing the values, because for example, if you look at the actual data that's behind it, right? Sum of rating, doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what I would probably do is look for the average of ratings. So this makes more sense that we're going from basically 3 to 3.7 rather than looking at the summed up version, which showed me that we're going from 600 to almost 1.5K, right? There can be a rating of 1.5K. So I would want to be looking at the average, for example. So this is the main idea. You play around with the values, you see how it works, and once you have, let's say, at least two visuals, you can utilize the cross-chart filtering capabilities and just, for example, select few months on the timeline. That's going to filter out the scatter plot. On the scatter plot, I want to focus on Sydney. Go down to the next level. That's going to filter out, again, everything on this side as well. So it just works together fluently, right? You don't have to hold down those control keys or anything like that. So that's one part of it. Before we go further, I just wanted to remind you guys, if you do have any questions, make sure you post them so that I can go through them afterwards. And from my side, the first sort of question to you, a very quick question, right, is have you managed to learn something new so far? Just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. That's as simple as that, right? Let's keep it very simple. I just want to see if what I'm showcasing is adding any value, because the last thing I want to do is have sessions where it just becomes a waste of time, right? So I just want to see how you guys are doing, if you're getting anything new from this or if this is all already known knowledge. So the timeline, the scatter plot, what else we had here? We had the map visual. Let's go ahead and also create a map on the side. So for the map visual, there are a few things that I would always consider and take into account. So the first things first, for the map visual, you have to remember that you need a longitude and a latitude. And this is something that we always try to provide within the data set, right? In this case as well, you have a latitude and you have a longitude. So let's go for latitude and longitude. Let's add that to the visual. And this is all you need to create a very basic setup of the map visual. These are the two mandatory fields. Everything else you add on top of it is optional. So you could just leave the visual like this. It doesn't tell a very good story, but hey, at least it allows you to see, for example, geographically where you have the highest congestion of locations that are purchasing your merchandise or product or whatever it is, right? That's one of the things. You could also play around with, for example, the clustering distances. So this allows for you to define how much relative size in pixels are you defining to take the clusters from. So for example, if I increase it to something like 90, you can see that instead of 5 different points, I suddenly have 3 different points. But the cool thing about how these clusters work is the closer you get, the more split version of that information you're getting. So the main capability, or the reason why we added this, is because what we wanted to battle is the congestion of information. You want to have a visual that allows you to have an overview and then drill down into smaller details if it is necessary. If it's not, for example, beneficial, or if you want to particularly look at individual locations, there are ways on how to do that. But this allows you to have an overview and then zoom in if it's needed, right? can see that, for example, in UK, we actually have few places. Here we have one location that has a geolocation. Let's see, order location. We're also going to add a name, Manchester. I'm pretty sure these coordinates are going to be incorrect. Unless I've forgotten where Manchester is. This seems a bit off. But this is the reality of data. Remember, guys, the data is not always going to be perfect, right? There's going to be some errors because, well, not always data is secure and written in the correct format. There's sometimes human error. There's sometimes errors when you're just loading the data. So part of your work is going to be cleaning the data. So in this case, I would just be like, okay, I probably need to look at data for Manchester and see the longitude and latitude for it, and just change it in the original data source. It happens from time to time. That's all completely fine. And same then we can afterwards go, for example, now we can actually do this. Once we know that there's one location that had those issues, I would probably do something like this. I would just have all the locations and then just click one by one and see, for example, okay, that's in Austin. You can see that the node is covering the location. So I would probably make the maximum size smaller as well, just so we can kind of see the name a little bit better. And maybe the fill color transparency, just switch it off for now, or just have no fill for now, right? Afterwards, I'm going to turn it back. But if I select Cardiff, we can see that there's location right here, Cleveland, yep, Detroit, Dublin. So just double checking, right? I know it's petty, it's annoying, you don't want to do it, but in order to make a good report, you need to make sure that the data that you're showcasing is showing something valuable, right? That what you actually have there allows you to provide the necessary information. Um, Afterwards, what I did is, let me take a closer look at the map I had there. So I had value and I had categories to showcase the donuts. Okay. So what I'm going to do is do the same. I'm going to have, first of all, I'm going to add a category. The category is going to be the product category. Nothing changes. That's fine. The only thing that changed is, take a look at this, right? You can see that there's 20 different points. As soon as I add a product category, there's suddenly 60 points. Why 60? Because essentially every location has 3 different products that they're selling. So it makes 3 unique combinations. And for each location, you have 3 unique combinations. So it's the total number of unique combinations. So once I do that, I know that, okay, it's splitting down correctly. Then afterwards, I'm going to be using value from total sales. And now in order to enable the donut charts, I need to go to the formatting options of the map, open up node settings, and enable right here pie charts and nodes. I do that, seems okay. The only other issue that I have here is, if you look at the colors, the center of the cluster is exactly the same color that I'm using for the first slice. And that's something that you definitely want to avoid. So I go back to the node settings and say that the fill color for the cluster is going to be, for example, gray. All right, that seems okay. Now the other issue is the font color of the value. Now I could, of course, go to inside labels and say that the font color is black, which makes it readable, but it gives me another challenge. This number is okay. This number, if I want to squint my eyes, I can probably read it. This number, there's just no way that I'm going to read that, right? Because it's just too small. So what happens by default is you're trying to put the values within the size of the bubble, right? Within the size of the cluster. Now, if that's something that you don't want to do, is remember you have the possibility of course, playing around with, let's say, the min-max radiuses. So for example, I'm putting everything on 30. But if I do that, it's becomes kind of hard for me to quickly distinguish which region has the highest gross sales, right? So this, I still want to keep it, but I want to make these readable to everyone. So an alternative way is, instead of showcasing value labels inside, I can force them to be outside. And once they're outside, they're no longer tied to the size of the bubble or the cluster. So I can start to play around with them a bit more and go to outside labels. And you can see there's a font size, which can be either auto. So auto is always going to be following, again, the size of things. That's something I don't want to do. I want to fix it. It seems it could be slightly bigger. So I'm going to make it 14, for example. Cool. The background opacity, I want to make it more clear. So for example, I'm going to keep the color in black, but the opacity is going to be like 80%, just to make it more prominent. And now whenever I zoomed in and these are getting split down, you can see I can still always read these values. It doesn't necessarily sort of change the way you look at it. It just gives you a cleaner look at everything. So that's one of the things. Just give me a sec, guys. hmm All right. So what else? So that's going in for the nodes itself. One thing that you can play around with as well is, I don't think it's necessary in this case, but you can play around with different ideas if you want to. And that is that, for example, one of the primary things we also wanted to have for the map is you have the ability to split it down into separate colors, images, shapes, and so forth, right? But if you're going to be adding them and have a cluster, nothing's going to happen. Because when you have a cluster, it's basically a combination of multiple items, right? So the visual is not capable of knowing, okay, what image am I supposed to showcase here if there's 10 of them? Is it the one with the highest value, the one with the lowest, the average value? So what we do is we just default to a cluster view. But if you go under node settings, you have this property called max clustering zoom level. And this allows you to split it down into smaller segments if it's needed to. So for example, I can say that after level 5, for example, and I start zooming in, you can see I'm still using clusters, still clusters, still clusters. I can actually go to toolbar as well and enable zoom numbers so I know which level I'm on. One more, and you can see that instead of those clusters, I'm now showcasing individual locations. The reason why I said in this case it might not be the best idea is because if you also have things like product categories, like I said, you basically have three items in the same location. So it just kind of looks clunky, right? If I wouldn't have the product category, then it's fine until you surpass that particular level. So if I go to level 5, we can see these clusters. Play around with the fill colors again. So for example, see that's around here, and disable the pie charts because you don't always need to. So still working with clustering, and then afterwards I split it down into individual locations. So there's a room for flexibility as well to kind of play around with it and see, okay, what interesting ideas I can achieve with this. And the most important thing though is just remember, guys, that you don't always have to use every single thing that I showcase. No, these are just some ideas that you might come across and be like, that's an interesting approach that I could play around with, right? So that's for the map. What else? Inside outside label, shape layers. We could play around with shape layers, but since we have locations across the globe, I wouldn't say it's too necessary. The base layer, we could play around. Oh, we could actually do this. The map itself, always remember, is whenever you're using a map visual, right? This is something to always think about. If you're using an actual map as the background of it, it means that every single time you zoom in, you're essentially asking and loading hundreds upon hundreds of images, right? Because the background is just a compilation of thousands of images. So every single time you zoom in, there's a request to an external host, which gives you all these images, and then they're populated on the map. If you don't care about the street name and so forth, one of the things that you can utilize is, for example, something like this. You can say that the base layer for the map is actually none, so there's no map whatsoever. I know it seems weird, trust the process, but then enable a shape layer. So this gives me overall, shapes for the world. I can still understand the geographical location of things, but I don't care about the actual city name underneath it, right? I just want to see an overall geographical position of my main sales points, for example. So that's something to think about as well. You don't necessarily always have to use the whole map. No. Sometimes having something like this is amazing because it allows you to fit it a lot nicer into the overall concept. And yeah, for those of you who don't know and want to say hi, hey Tony. So we also have a guest in our audience, so Tony Tua. Hey man. And he's also going to be one of our guest judges for when you have the top five. So make sure you say hi to him, follow him, and see what he's been up to. So, what else? Yeah, for example, when it needs to be fitting into the overall theme of a report, we can go back to, let's say, in the same Zoom Charts website, see it, some of the examples that were created, resources, report examples made by Zoom Charts, I think it was. Yeah, for example, sales overview. And you can see it right here. We're still utilizing the same map. And if I would have a physical map behind it, it would just look kind of, just overcrowded. So I'm just utilizing shapes for it. And for the shapes, you can also go under the shape layers and say that, hey, the fill color is actually going to be, I don't know, blue, for example. The outline is going to be in the black color. So you can make it fit really nicely into the overall theme of the report and the color scheme that you're creating there. So that's something also to take into account. One of the things that I was asked by the team to cover, because we were having a lot of questions regarding it, is going to be field parameters. So I'm going to quickly create a field parameter with just a few different columns, right? So in order to do that, you go to modeling right here in the top ribbon. You go to new parameters and fields. Then I'm going to take from the original data two things. I'm going to say the product category is one of the properties that I want to change, and the other one is the flag, whether it's not an international shipping order. You can choose whether you want to add it as a slicer or not. I'm going to keep it. So there's going to be a new slicer right here. And in the data view, you also have a new table called parameters. So I have multiple because I already played around previously. But what it allows you to do is I can afterwards, for example, remove the legend from the timeline and use the parameter that I just created. Sometimes it might give you this error, meaning that it kind of got confused. Okay, what do you want me to do? And that's because what I'm trying to do is basically switch between the value of the parameter and the parameter name itself. So just know that under this little triangle, you have the option of showcasing selected field or the value of the selected field. So if I switch it to a value, I can now choose, hey, whether I want to split the product based on international shipping flags or product categories. And just to make sure that the user doesn't get confused, I'm also going to enable a legend. I'm going to put it as an inline at top and have it centered. So right here, the user always understands what is represented by each of the colors. So we do support field parameters, and I think they work for most of the visuals, maybe some specific nuance cases where it doesn't work, but for most cases it does work and you can easily implement it. And field parameters, for those of you who don't know, is basically an amazing way on how you can make a single chart into tens of different variations of the same chart. Because you can do this with textual categories and you can also do this with numerical categories, well, numerical columns as well. The only difference is that this is one of the places where people get confused, right? Just because I did this, the next following method is, okay, I'm going to go to fields, right? Go to data and be like, okay, I'm going to add total sales because it's the same principle. And I'm also going to be adding, I don't know, quantity, for example. Click create, all good, have the same idea, same approach, perfect. I'm going to add the new parameter as one of the series. So for example, series 1. So we can again see its first parameter. means I have to switch to showcase the value of the selected, but then it just still gives me an error, right? Even if I try to add this as a table, you can see, okay, it kind of gives you one or the other. Okay, cool. So table, it kind of works on visuals. Even if I wanted to create like a column chart, it doesn't always work, right? So I'm going to have, for example, international shipping based on one or the other. So it doesn't really work. That's because what happens with field parameters is you get a value for each row, right? So in order to kind of work around this, you can do a very quick thing, and that is create measures. In this case, since I still want to showcase total sales and total quantity, I can just say total sales M. That's going to be the measure. I'm going to be utilizing just sum, nothing super complex, just the original sum, so that I get the same approach I would have when I just have a column here, right? And I also have the same for total quantity. I'm going to send sum, quantity. You can, of course, change the aggregation. It's just the main idea is create a measure for it. Now go again, modeling, new parameter fields based on data. Make sure you add the measures, not the original columns. You're going to get a new slicer. There we go. You get a new table, parameter for it. You can rename these whenever you make them. I would always recommend to name them into something rather than just keeping it a parameter, right? But I'm lazy. And for the sake of just saving some little bit of time, I didn't rename them. So this is the last one we created, parameter 4. And now what I'm going to do is just replace the series with the new parameter. And you can see now this allows me to switch between, for example, the measures. See, even I was starting to get confused. So this is becoming obsolete. But now this allows me to say, hey, I want to look at the total sales. And looking by the numbers, you can see it adapt. Or I can look at the quantity. You can see it switches because in this case, we're going up to 100K, right? So the y-axis is switching. In quantity, we go a little bit over a K. So this already basically gives me 4 different visuals. So playing around with the field parameters is definitely a skill that I recommend learning. Same goes for bookmarks, slicers, different variations of slicers, and so forth. Like, you don't always have to implement everything. But the more you know, the more ideas you can think about and see which one kind of feels best suited for this particular challenge, right? So yeah, that goes for field parameters. Knowing how much time we have left, that's about 10 minutes. Just want to make sure that I cover also the questions. So yeah, let's have a quick run through some of the questions that you have posted, if you have any. I just need to make sure as well. But if you have any, I want to make sure I covered them. So what's going to be the first one? Do we have any questions, team? There we go. Can we use parameters in map visual? If yes, please show that. Sure, you can. So here's the map visual. For example, we're going to be using one of the parameters I'm going to be using in a value field. So that's the parameter 4, where you had the switch between total sales and quantity. And remember, this is, for example, a dead giveaway that I'm using the wrong aggregation of it. So instead of first, I need to make sure I switch to show values of selected field. So now you can see the total sales is, for example, 519,000, or if I switch to quantity, that's 9,000 in this particular region. If we wanted to use the categorical approach, we can also do that. Just going to make sure that I enable pie charts. So for the category, I'm going to be using which parameter this was, parameter 2. So I'm going to be using parameter as the category. There we go. I want to make sure that I'm using the value. And here we can see I'm switching between different product types or whether or not it was international shipping. Just remember colors, right? Now I have the issue where the center color was the same as one of these side colors. So just play around with that. Make sure they're not overlapping, and if they are, that they're representing the same thing. Like if it's light blue here, it makes sense that it's light blue here, right? But it doesn't make sense that the center is light blue. So just play around with those. That's all fine. So yeah, you can use fill parameters and the visuals support it. If you come across a situation where it just doesn't work, then let us know, send us a sample, explain what you were trying to do, and we'll take a closer look at it. Because like I said, like any other product, we might have edge cases where things just don't work exactly like you expect to, but that's why we're willing to look into it and see what we can do about it. How did you get the month over month sales percentage and add it to the time series chart? So, one of the best things that I've learned when I started to use Power BI is that you don't have to know DAX by heart to create basic measures. And month over month is one of those. So, in order to create a month over month comparison, all I did is I went to Home, I found Quick Measures, I found under Select a Calculation, I found Time Intelligence, month over month change. There we go. Base value is the value that you want to start to compare. In this case, that's going to be under data and total sales. And the date, well, kind of says it for you. So that's the date, order date in this case. Click add, and that's the DAX that Power BI creates for you. And if I, for example, put it in a timeline visual, so we're going to have order date, and month over month too. You can see that I have two copies because that's exactly what I did before. And I'm just going to add it to the series, switch it to a monthly view so it just makes more sense. And you can see the numbers are there and it's comparing month over month sales. Now, what I did to get this effect, where I have those comparisons at the top of the chart, is the following. I took the same timeline, so I'm going to switch it now to regular total sales, right? I'm going to switch the view to monthly view. There we go. I'm going to close this tab because I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to add a second series, which is going to be the month over month sales. Now, having them both visible at the same time, that just doesn't make sense. I'm going to force the visual to stick to a monthly view, just the monthly view, because I don't want it to go up and down. Okay, you can see there's a small column right here, right? Having it there, doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what I could do is I could say that series 2 is actually going to be a line. First of all, I'm going to switch it to a line, but right now it's just a straight line and I can't really see it. And I'm going to assign it to a secondary axis because the timeline supports two y-axes. There's a primary and secondary axis. But if I look at these values, the one thing that I really don't like about sort of percentage comparisons is that it just goes up and down, right? Sometimes it might be above the column, sometimes it's like in the middle of a column. There's no definition of where I'm supposed to look for that comparison value. So what I did is, first of all, of course, enable the value labels for series 2, just so I know where they're located by default. Gotcha. I could play around with the positions, but that's not going to give me the wanted result. So what I did is I took the secondary y-axis, I scrolled down and found the property that allows me to adjust the value range. And I'm going to say that the minimum value is going to be like minus 10,000 and maximum is going to be a 0. That way I'm forcing it to be at the very top. But then there's one more thing. You can see that, okay, but suddenly we have these buttons and these values go above them. Just seems off. Well, that's because under toolbar, you can also force the position of the toolbar items. So I'm going to say now it's outside. Okay, now you can see all these values are right here. The one thing that I don't want to see is that line anymore because, well, it kind of becomes obsolete, right? You can agree with that. So what I'm going to do is just go to series 2 configuration, which is the line, and say that the line width is going to be 0. The line is gone. I have just the numbers. To make the numbers a little bit more readable and understandable for the end user, I'm also going to go down to value labels for series 2 and enable conditional formatting for font colors. By default, they're still going to be on black color because they're referencing the average number of the series. So I'm going to switch this to a constant value and 0 and say that the lower value is going to be this shade of red and the upper one is going to be this shade of green. Kind of a bit too bright, so just going to choose a different one. There you go. Now, if you wanted to, right, and still wanted to have that line there, you could just go ahead and say that, hey, I want to have a series 3, which is going to be still a line. And in this case, yeah, okay, never mind. It's not going to really work. I would need a third y-axis for that. I mean, with few workarounds, we could do it. We could make another visual which is transparent sitting in the back, but nah, that would just be breaking the experience. So yeah, this is what I did with it. Month over month created through quick measures, and then this was just pure customization of the chart. How do we calculate patterns in repeat purchases? Customer ID not given. Let's see the dictionary. Do we have anything that allows us to identify it? For each order made, order date, product ID, category, gender, age, city, location, international shipping. Yeah, I'd say we can calculate the patterns in repeat purchases. Ideally, we could just base it on assumption. We could base it on assumption that, I don't know, you can create a randomized column. Like in this data set, there's no pattern whatsoever. It's randomized. But as a idea, what you could do is just create a combination of combining gender, age, and location. Sure, it's not going to be ideal because the same age can be for example, I don't know, I'm 31 years old, right? Male, Latvia. If there's multiple males 31 in Latvia, well, we're all in the same bucket, but at least it can give you an idea of it. But yeah, what I would probably do is just, if there's not enough data, I just usually do this, right? I would go ahead and say that this is customer ID or customer group, basically. I would use a random between, go from 0 to 3, and then just use one of these numbers that are being generated through the calculation as a concatenated value in the combination of age, location, and gender. Because you can go up to 100, for example. It doesn't really matter. I would probably do something like that. And then based on this, see if there's any patterns that the random decided to showcase. Okay, we have another one. I want to ask about the scatter chart. When I turn on category as a legend, I use two categories. And when I click on unknown categories, which displays the second category, and then it's smaller, it must be zoomed out to return to default visualization. Apply. I use two categories. Okay, let's go ahead and create one. So there's a scatter, which uses, let's say, the same. Doesn't matter what the numbers are going to be right now. I just want to replicate the situation. Two different categories. Okay. And if I zoom in into one, it didn't zoom in completely. Okay, yeah, that seems that it could be a bug. It's definitely not supposed to be like that. So yeah, Andreas, thanks for pointing that out. I'm going to take a look at it afterwards and ask the team what's really happening there, because that seems like a bug. All right. Anything else? Do we have any more questions? How can I download custom Zoom charts? This is my first time participating in the challenge. So in order to get the license, in order to use our visuals, because our visuals are covered by a license, you need to go into our website. You need to open up the challenge, in this case, the Onyx Data Challenge. You need to sign up for the challenge through our form. So I agree. I don't need to necessarily subscribe, but I'm just going to be using my email. I don't need to sign in again, right? I'm just going to use my Zoom charts. So then you're going to get here, register, and you're going to have two more options. Yeah, I can submit a report, and I have see my license, but you're going to have get a developer's license. So here, once you click on it, it's going to give you generated email account and password. You can use this email account and password in Power BI desktop to log in, and that's going to give you access to all of our visuals. If you want to just download one of them on your existing account, just know that there's going to be license restrictions, like on your personal accounts. You can do it through Get More Visuals and just type in Zoom charts in the search. You can see we have a bunch of different visuals. And I got the message that there's no more questions. I think we're done for today. What do you think, guys? So yeah, I would say the last question from me is, if you could put, or if you only had one emoji to use, what would be the emoji you would give for this session, right? Show me how good or bad I was. Is basically what I'm trying to get from this. But yeah, if there's no more questions, as always, I really hope that you managed to learn something new from this session and it was interesting and insightful. That you didn't just spend an hour of your time looking at something that was boring as hell and you didn't learn anything new, because that would be a complete waste of time. So I hope it wasn't that, and it was interesting and amazing. And the only other thing left to do is for me to tell you guys good luck. Don't be afraid to have your submissions posted and submitted, and go through that feedback that we send to you. And I'll see you in the next webinar, where I'm going to be joined by Tony. So Tony, looking forward to that as well, and where we're going to be going through the top 5 submissions. So make sure you also sign up for that. Other than that, thank you so much, guys, for your time, for your patience, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.